Good afternoon. This is the reconvening of the committee as a whole. This is December the 2nd, 2024. I'm your president of Baltimore City Council and chairman of committee of the whole, Nick J. Mosby. Joined to my left, we have Councilwoman Odette Ramos. We have Chairman Schleifer. We have Councilman Burnett. We have Chairman Costello. We have Chairman Stokes. We have Chairman Conway. We have Councilwoman Felicia Porter. We have Madam Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, and we have Councilman Zeke Cohen. To my right, we have the amazing Marguerite, who is always here to serve, provide, and protect for this body, the City Council. We're reconvening these two bills. It's Council Bills 24-0594, Citywide Affordable Housing Bond Issuance, as well as City Council Bill 24-0595, Citywide Affordable Housing Development District. At the last time that we had the opportunity to meet on this bill, which was November the 12th, the committee was provided three amendments. Two of those amendments are from the administration, and one is a friendly amendment from this body. Before we take up the amendments, I would like to allow the administration, if you could, just for the record, state your name, agency you are here from, and if there's any additional testimony that you would like to add from our November 12th meeting, starting with the Law Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hillary Rulli on behalf of the Law Department. We approve all the amendments for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Janelle Rogers, Bureau of Treasury Management Finance, and we are in favor of the bill.
Thank you. Mr. CFO.
Good afternoon. Michael Moxton, Director of the Baltimore Department of Finance. In favor of the bill, no additional testimony.
Thank you so much, Mr. CFO. Madam Commish.
Good afternoon. Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner, Department of Baltimore Housing and Community Development, and we stand by our bill reports in favor of both 24-0594 and 24-0595.
And in the amendments, is that accurate?
And with the amendments.
Thank you so much, Madam Commish.
Good afternoon. I'm Stacy Freed, Executive Advisor to the Housing Commissioner.
Thank you so much. And MOGR, last but not least.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Nina Themlis, Director of the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. Thank you.
Thank you. You in the seat? You got to announce yourself.
Tyler Schnella, Mayor's Office of Government Relations.
Thank you so much. Now, at this time, we're going to turn it over to council members. Are there any questions, concerns that council members would like to bring up to the administration at this time? At this time, I'm going to recognize Councilwoman Odette Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'm glad we're able to come back together today. I want to acknowledge, thank you to the Commissioner and to the Mayor's Office and to the Department of Finance did meet with me separately, so I did get a lot of my questions answered that I had from before. And I also want to say thank you to the Commissioner. The piece of data that I had also asked for, which was the separation of the properties that are going to be initially the increment will come from versus the properties that are going to be eligible. I received that list and I appreciate that as well. So I understand how this is going for. So, but just to be transparent and for the public, I wanted to ask a couple of my questions publicly so that the council has the opportunity to hear the answers, but also that so does the public. So one of my questions was about how long the increment, so about 4,000 of the properties are going to be used initially for the increment, which will go into a pot that will then be used to float the bonds, but that money isn't just for 1 year. It's, my understanding is that is for the length of the bonds in order to pay back the bonds. So that could be 20 or 30 years depending on the length of the bond that we float. Is that correct?
That is correct, and like with all TIFs that we do in the city, and then also specifically called out in the legislation, which we added, it clearly states if there's any additional revenue from the bond, from the increment that is not needed to repay the bonds, that goes back to the general fund.
Correct, and the way that the calculation works is that you've made the calculation based on actually going over. So when we talk about 125% coverage, that's actually like, we've figured that there's probably going to be more anyway.
Correct.
Just to make sure that we're there, okay. Do we know how much we don't know yet how much that's going to be?
No, we don't have that yet.
And that's because that the 1,600 properties that were added in one of the amendments needs to actually be reassessed, is that correct?
We've only added 600 properties.
Excuse me, you're right, I've added.
670 in the amendment, so that is being calculated, and then as with any TIF in the city, the city plus the consultants at MuniCap work with SDAT to get the base level, and so once we get that base level, that's what's used to then calculate to go in for sale for the first tranche of bonds. So,
Right. And so we've got this initial 4,300 properties where the increment is being taken from. And then as the properties that are going to be eligible for the money, plus any other rehabbed property. Oh, no, it has to only be in the legislation. So the remaining 4,000 properties, as they get rehabbed, that increment is also going to be taken for the next tranche of bonds?
correct, that will be used for the next tranche of bonds.
Right, but we don't know how long that's going to take, because sometimes it takes more than 2 years to rehab a
Well,
property.
for that, you don't have to, correct. So we don't know what that amount would be at this point, but we know that the first group of properties that have already been rehabbed, received their use and occupancy permit, or will be coming online, those will be used to create that first increment. And then we're anticipating that we've roughly think about scheduling that next tranche, we would be looking at being able to go to market with that next tranche probably 2 years after the first tranche.
Okay, so that the legislation lasts long enough that would be
Absolutely.
available to do that. Got it, okay. And then my last piece was, can you explain the affordability period again in terms of once that funding is used to rehab a property? Could be 50,000, right? How long does that property have to stay affordable?
There is no singular answer to that because it'll depend on it'll depend on multiple different components of the project that will dictate how long it will be. So if it's one of the community land trusts that utilizes that $50,000, then that affordability would be basically in perpetuity.
Well, I think that the issue is just that the fact that the charter doesn't say that these bonds have to be utilized, that the affordability period is not for the life of the bonds.
Correct. So
It
that's
just says
why
affordable.
there will be other components of programs, whether or not it is with a land trust or whether or not it's an affordability on a deed restricted component or different ways to formulate down payment and closing cost assistance with a second mortgage, et cetera, that will then have that deed restriction in that would implicate length of affordability after that. So
But the intent is for the administration to
Yes.
work hard to keep these as affordable as long as possible, simply to ensure that our, shared value of intentional mixed income communities actually comes to
Exactly,
fruition.
and that is one of the key pieces, is that balance of affordability at all different levels as well. That's one of the reasons why the funding from the TIF can go towards closing that appraisal gap and then also going to different varying levels of affordability.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman, Ramos. We've also been joined by Councilman Dorsey as well as Councilman Bullock and Councilman Glover. Are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this body? Chairman Costello, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Director Moxton, what is the city's current bond rating?
The general obligation bond rating is AA.
And is that bond rating of a AA for GO, is that in jeopardy of being downgraded?
It is a AA with a stable outlook. There's no indication that it would be downgraded. And we asked for and received an additional debt study from our external consultants that tested a number of scenarios for the city slowly growing its capital program. And on top of that, we explicitly put in TIF scenarios, including kind of the most extreme possible TIF scenarios. And the result of that study is that all of our metrics are within the range that is considered stable and consistent with that AA rating.
So all 8 of the metrics that are, let me go back to the debt study that you referenced separate from the bond rating. So there are, I believe, 8 metrics which make up the bond rating in aggregate.
There are 8 metrics that Prague, our debt consultant, uses to track as a proxy. What ratings agencies will tell you is that it's not as simple as a formula. They do look at it holistically. So it's the 8 metrics in Prague are sort of our best cut at what effectively makes up the bond rating.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to imply any simplicity to any of this topic matter. But you said that all 8 of those metrics are within range, is that correct?
The 8 metrics, to get a little bit more into the details of the debt study, they all stay within recommended ranges through the next several years. Now, the city is planning on, like I mentioned before, slowly growing its capital program. And as we do that, with a long-term goal of getting from where we were from about $80 million a year of annual GO borrowing up to an eventual goal 10 years from now, we're hoping to reach $200 million. As you go through that, you go through a period where your debt gets a little bit younger in the sense that you're taking on a lot of new debt. And so some of the metrics that measure that kind of get close to the edge of that envelope and then go back later into the safe side. So the original recommendation kind of factors in some of those metrics getting close or right on the edge. The most critical metrics have to do with the city's reserves, and those are very deeply in the safe side. The city has very big reserves, actually, for the size of our revenue stream. So all of that is kind of before you consider the TIF. The TIF does not change where these metrics end up falling in the envelope. So overall, the Prague kind of final finding is that the city's debt portfolio with TIF included is still on the whole consistent with a AA.
Right, but look, again, I'm not talking about the TIF right now, I'm talking about the bond rating.
Sure.
So there are 8 metrics that in aggregate help formulate a rating that is assigned to us by bond rating agency or agencies. Of those 8, 2 of those deal with debt and liquidity, if I'm not mistaken, comprising 30% of the aggregate score, while the other 6 compose 70% of the aggregate score. And is it not true that of those 8 metrics, the city is underperforming in 5 of the 8? Is that not true?
Let me go into the detail. I'm not entirely sure, Councilmember, what you're referring to with the with the percentage allocation, just to kind of go through the metrics directly, there is the bond payout ratio. That was the one that I had mentioned where we sort of cut close to the envelope because our debt gets younger as we grow our debt. Then there is the general fund balance to general fund revenues. That's what I would describe, I think, what most fiscal analysts would describe as the big one. It's basically how generous your reserves are, and that's the one where we're deeply in the safe area and overperforming most cities. And then there's debt outstanding per capita, debt outstanding as a percentage of full value, debt outstanding as a percentage of personal income tax. All of these basically measure how much debt you have out there. The city is currently in safe ranges, and the finding was that we stay basically within and roughly around the safe ranges. As I mentioned before, you go through a period where you kind of get close to one edge of the envelope and then you recover back from that. But sort of going from just like the front line findings of the Prague report, we are overall and on the whole in what's considered to be consistent with a AA.
Well, my understanding was that we were underperforming, or if you don't necessarily have to use that terminology, performing beneath the median, if that's more fair or appropriate, in 5 to 8 categories. But moving toward the debt study, which considered a number of different scenarios, including extreme TIFs, as you referenced, those were your words. Prague completed that study? And you have a copy of that study?
I do. It was also shared with.
Mr. CFO, just for the edification for the general public and maybe for some members who have not had a chance to be briefed on the Prague report, could you go over what the Prague report is? Could you also talk about the steps that the council asked the administration to do to update the Prague report to bring it in line with the current version of the bill that we're dealing with today? So just go through all that, because Prague is just a word to everybody until you explain what it is.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President. So in 2023, the City of Baltimore engaged the Public Resources Advisory Group, known to us as PRAG, to complete a review of its debt policy and provide recommended changes and amendments. This was done in context at the time of the city considering going to the voters with a larger ask for its next round of general obligation debt in line with a growing capital program. In discussions around the bill currently in front of the council, we received a request from the council president's office to update the Prague study to explicitly put in scenarios for the TIF. We completed that study. We asked Prague to complete that study. They completed that, shared that with the city, and that has since been shared with the council. The key findings from that updated study are as follows. I'm actually just going to read now straight from the Prague report from the top line of each of the 4 findings. The first finding is that Prague's observations are based on assumptions provided by the city. This is just Prague sort of stating how they do their methodology, and then they go into some detail about that methodology. Number 2, a review of the city's debt ratios shows that the city's planned GO borrowing remains affordable. And they go into some detail on that. Number 3, current estimates demonstrate that the city may issue bonds for the affordable housing TIF program without breaching its debt ratio guidelines. That was what I was kind of just referring to in being consistent with our current AA. And finally, number 4, Prague believes that the what we call the smooth scenario, or scenario 1, which assumes that the city issues bonds for the affordable housing TIF program more gradually, as we talked about with our tranche approach, is the optimal choice from a debt affordability and programmatic standpoint.
Thank you, Mr. President and Director. So the Prague report concludes that the city will still be on track to achieve its goal of increasing annual GO financing from, I think you said 80 million to 200 million over a 10-year period. What was the figure?
While retaining our AA rating, knowing what we know today. That's correct.
So we're going to authorize $150 million of these bonds, and we're still going to be on track to increase GO financing from 80 to $200 million in 10 years.
That is correct, and the reason for why that's true is because these bonds are revenue backed and are backed by a combination of revenue that's already existing and revenue that will be generated by current tranches for future tranches. Yes, the city had not updated its debt policy for many years until this review in 2023. Our GO borrowing was actually getting quite low as an overall percentage of our operating budget, and this catch-up is consistent with operational best practice and with keeping us in the AA range.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the first conversations we had, Mr. CFO, when you came to Baltimore was increasing the GO bonding capacity because it appeared to be low based off of the historic data associated with it. At this time, are there any additional questions or concerns? Thank you, Chairman Costello, for your detailed questions. Obviously, the bond rating is critically important to all of us, and it's important that we keep a watchful eye on it. That's why, again, we appreciate you, Mr. CFO, in working to go back and get the updated study done in time for this term to end. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Chair. Chairman Stokes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this is for Commissioner Kennedy, and we already talked about the disinvestment. My question is, how are you going to implement that in terms of the TIFs? So when we talk about Broadway East and South Clifton Park and Dolly Park and Midway, that the disinvestment shows what the community look like. My question is there going to be a target for those communities, and how did that work? And do you have a target date when you're going to roll it out? Because I like the TIF piece, but the disinvestment part, we can't miss that. And that's why some of those neighborhoods look like somebody dropped a bomb in it. They need to change. We got young people, they got to walk through there. You got Cecil Elementary School over there that's doing great, the principal, but to walk through those neighborhoods and see some of those houses, not because the community wanted to look like it, it's just the disinvestment. So my question to you is, how are you going to implement, and I'm sure my colleagues have the same issues in their community also, but I'm just talking about the TIF and how do they work in those communities I just mentioned in the 12th District.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had several meetings with the Broadway East community and others going over the properties that are in the TIF district, that are in their communities. The way that the TIF funding works is it goes specifically to those addresses that are in the TIF district, which are the addresses in our majority disinvested communities. In terms of all of the council districts, the 9th district has the highest percentage of vacant properties in the city, as well as the highest percentage that's included in the TIF. But every district and the 12th that has those neighborhoods that you mentioned are included. And then the way that the funding works is once we go out to market for the first tranche of bonds, those bonds will be available to provide the funding via a grant. So we cannot actually, per the charter and the city's TIF policy, we cannot loan the money in. So it is a grant that goes into the close that appraisal gap, which supports the reconstruction and construction of the properties, and also helps to drive affordability depending upon where the target affordability is for that. So the persons that are renovating the property, whether or not it's a developer or it could be an individual that owns the property that is in the TIF district, that they want to do the renovation themselves, they can apply as an individual. They do not have to be a developer to apply, or a community development corporation or a builder. They'll apply, and we will then process that application, provide the funding. We have to double check all of their invoices, make sure that everything is TIF eligible, and then it's paid out actually by Ms. Rogers, and it's held, all the funds are held in a special account. So they are not part of the DHCD budget. They're in a special account, and those are paid out once it's approved by the agency, MuniCap, and then finance to pay.
Thank you for that, but my other question would be, how do we now, because there's more poor black neighborhoods in the city, how do we get more developers, black developers to be part of that? And the only reason I ask it, because I want the public to understand and know what's going on.
No, it's a great question. So some of the ways that we are getting more of our developers to be a part, we just had our request for qualifications that covered Broadway East, South Clifton, East Baltimore Midway, as well as Coldstream, Homestead, Montebello, to have those smaller developers or developers apply so that they're ready. We also are supporting a number of different entities that are also doing training programs for some of our small developers, especially our small minority women developers. One of them is Develop Her, which is run by Joanna Bartholomew and her team. We're supporting the next cohort there. We also have Charm City Buyers that runs some small developer training that we've partnered with BDC on doing some additional training. So, we want people to be engaged. We want people to be entering into this place and workforce. We're also working with the state as it relates to workforce development needs, so we can also help encourage people to be entering in the construction trades across the board that are needed to redevelop the neighborhoods that have been disinvested in.
Last question, and only saying this so the public, because a lot of times they don't always have access to the information. So as a small developer, how many if they qualify, how many pieces of property can they develop? Like 1, 2, 4, 5, it depends on how many it is and where they're located, but do you have a target of how many whoever qualify can?
I mean, the target is in part going to be based on what their capacity is and what their financial capacity is. We do look at having a minimum of, $90,000 either through loans or other types of financing. We are talking with some other lending institutions to put into some place some other components. We know that lending is one of the biggest things that actually holds back our small developers and access to capital. So one of the programs that we're looking to do the seed funding with is not with this, but with other funds, is a program that will provide lines of credit, because that's actually one of the biggest things that are needed are lines of credit for capital and operating to support the developers.
Thank you.
At this time, Madam VP.
Just one question. Listening, are the Main Street properties included in this, or is it just residential? Because we have areas that have been designated main streets like Park Heights Avenue, other areas throughout the city, York Road, Eastern Avenue, are people that have an opportunity to renovate a storefront for a business. Is that included?
So the TIF itself is the affordable housing tax increment financing, and the funding has to go to support the creation of affordable housing units. So the Main Street properties were not included, but we have another program that we're working on funding that is specifically geared towards those Main Street properties as a live-work incentive that we want to support our small businesses and our entrepreneurs being able to renovate what is now a vacant property, potentially have their storefront on the first floor. If it's a 2-story or 3-story, have their storefront or place of business, and then also have a living space as well. So that'll be coming. That isn't part of the TIF, though.
Just want to make sure that that's very important to keep all those connecting dots together and you're just not focusing on one entity. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions, Councilman Glover?
Hi, Commissioner, you mentioned earlier with Councilman Stokes in the Broadway East community that there were some groups already that asked for the qualifications, the right for qualifications. Do you know offhand those groups that are asking? And when you mentioned the Broadway East community, are you mentioning those that ask, are they in my part of the Broadway East community or they in Councilman Stokes' part of the Broadway East community? Because the reason why I ask is because we have several community associations that just started up in our community. And what I see is that they're geared to help developers by writing letters of support. And I don't support any of that stuff, but they're sending you guys letters of support, and I'm finding out on the back end. These are small groups that are starting community associations, and they're making sure that their outlines are in the areas where the development is taking place so that these developers are getting letters of support from these new community associations that are taking place.
That is an excellent question. I don't have the full list of everybody that applied. It is for the entire Broadway East community. It's not divided by council district. Happy to go over the list with you, and it would also be good to check in with you as well as the Department of Planning that maintains the list of community associations, so we can also keep track of whatever's coming in that is kind of new or potentially just there to be supportive of one developer over the other or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll definitely go over the list with you. I don't have it off the top of the head. The team's still doing initial kind of threshold, and then we'll be doing those reviews.
So that's fine. Just want to make sure that I get it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Dorsey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just thought I'd just note that, over the years, I've been among a number of people who really don't love tax increment financing. There's a wealth of research and reporting on the kind of the dubious notion of public benefit when it's used for like big projects. The public doesn't tend to see a great return, if any, on investment. I think that using it in a more strategic way like this, that's not like kind of a aiming for like banking on some sort of like windfall, huge like game changer project, I think is a much smarter way of using this tool. I think it's an inventive way of using the tool, and where it is specifically targeted at one, alleviating this blight of vacancy that we've had on our hands and have struggled. I mean, I consider the Department of Housing and Community Development to basically allocate at least 50% of everything that it does to addressing vacancy and blight. I mean, there's nothing I equate more with the department's work than to trying to address this. It's an enormous kind of Sisyphean kind of feat, but that we're actually making progress on. And I think that creating new tools and new opportunities like this continues to reassure me of the progress, ingenuity, and confidence that I have in the department's work and the administration's partnership to create new opportunity and to address, like as was said, this lending is such a challenging part of the development and redevelopment process. While there are so many barriers to be able to take on this critical issue of kind of the gaps that lending and the challenges and that just kind of site acquisition, but capital access present even to the most experienced developers. I'm just really happy to see this tool being put to work in this way. And I say that as somebody who, like, when I look at this map of properties that will benefit from this, you know, I could rattle off the numbers of the council districts that will benefit the most from this and where there's the least change that's going to come from this, the fewest properties that are eligible for what this offers. And I'm in the latter category with very few properties that are eligible for what this offers, but that, like, a rising tide floats all boats, and that the city does better in every corner of the city when we lift up and try to address the most challenging, pressing problems that face the hardest hit neighborhoods in the city, you know, which I'm fortunate to not represent, to represent one that's fared so well. So I just want to say thank you for bringing this forward, and I'm happy to be able to support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey. At this time, are there any additional questions or concerns from members? Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam Commissioner, and thank you to the whole team that is here. Also appreciate the creativity and ingenuity that has gone into designing this product. I think my only lingering concern is we should all be clear that we are facing some tough fiscal winds in the city of Baltimore, that the state of Maryland is clearly going to have a very challenging General Assembly session with a lot of unfunded obligations, and that we have had tremendous federal support over these last couple of years, particularly around infrastructure, and that I think it is a pretty good bet that that support may no longer be here for us. And so I worry about anything that can in any way endanger the fiscal health of the city. I think several folks, Director, the Commissioner had this conversation with you. I think this is a really interesting approach to addressing a critically important challenge in our city, but I do worry about that increment not going into our general fund and what that will do, you know, as we try to maintain our obligations to Kerwin and to, you know, transportation and all the other things that we want to do. So would just love to hear, I think from either of you or both, as we face down a season of potential fiscal austerity, what does it look like to, you know, essentially, best case scenario, be able to expeditiously rehabilitate and dispose of a whole lot of vacant and abandoned property, but not be able to capture that revenue back into, at least in the immediate, back into our general fund? Like, how are we thinking about that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Council Member, and thank you for the question. I absolutely share your concern for the fiscal winds that the city is facing, and we are taking on this approach and bringing this to the City Council very much in light of those concerns. The TIF is designed to be outside of the general fund and put as little pressure on the general fund as possible. You are right that it still makes use of revenue that perhaps otherwise could have gone for some other purpose. But the whole point in how it's structured is that these houses were going to stay vacant otherwise, and a vacant house produces no revenue. Now, if we could somehow find the money to rehabilitate that house, then it starts producing property tax revenue. In the best case scenario, it produces quite a bit more property tax revenue than what we need to pay off debt service, and so we actually come out not just net even, but we come out ahead on the general fund. But in those negative scenarios, this is where those tranches come in. If we go to market with this TIF, and we do a certain number of houses, and we are not getting the property tax revenue return that we would like to see, that basically just means that the next tranche has to be rethought. At no point are we putting pressure on the general fund to make up the difference. And the idea of this approach is to just keep testing and retesting. If it works in the best case scenario, it gives us another tool. It gives us a way to do something that wouldn't have happened otherwise and do it outside the general fund. In the worst case scenario, it basically just means that it goes slowly, but slow is still better than nothing. This is still rehabbing houses that would not have been rehabbed but for this fiscal tool that we're putting on the table. And so with that all said, we are going to work very closely with the council, not just in context of this TIF, but in context of our overall budget in facing down the challenges that that you just mentioned. City of Baltimore is not new to fiscal challenges. We've done it before. We've done it in the face of the Great Recession. We've done it in the face of a federal government that has not been friendly to us in the past. We have the benefit of a state partner still that is very much aligned with us philosophically, but we will do in the general fund what needs to be done to continue balancing our budget as we always have.
The but for, right?
The but for.
All right. Any other questions or concerns? Hearing and seeing none. Is there anything else for the agency would like to add? Hearing and seeing none, at this time, I'll entertain a motion. Remember, we have two amendments for Bill 24-0594, and then one amendment for 95. So we're gonna take the first two amendments for 24-0594. The first is the Law Department proposed amendment. Is there a motion? It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Please note that there's one nay, Chairman Costello. The next amendment is the amendment from my office. Is there a motion for the amendment? It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Please note that there's one in opposition, and that is Chairman Costello. At this time, the committee amendments have been moved and probably seconded and voted on and passed. I will take a motion to pass out this bill as amended. It's been moved and probably seconded. All in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The motion was made and properly seconded and voted out. We have one in the nay, and that's Chairman Costello. We're going to actually do roll call. So if we could, Madam Clerk, please call a roll.
President Mosby. Aye. Middleton.
Motion to vote. Vote it out.
Yes. Cohen.
Aye.
McCray is absent. Dorsey. Yes. Conway.
Aye.
Schleifer. Torrance. Absent. Burnett. Yes. Bullock. Aye. Porter. Absent. No. Oh, I'm so sorry. Aye. Costello.
Mr. President, I'm a no, and I'll explain my vote on the floor later this evening, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Stokes.
Thank you. I want to explain my vote. This has been long, should have been done a long time ago. And when you talk about TIFs, and Commissioner Kennedy know, since I've been on the council, I've been talking about how do we now take TIFs that we give to our developers, which is fine, I understand that. But how do we put those in neighborhoods where they need it? You look at Perkins, it was a great idea. So I'm happy to see the TIFs are now going to be going into those neighborhoods, part of this investment, so I vote yes.
Glover.
Yes.
And Ramos. Yes. Okay.
The ayes have it. This motion to pass the Bill 24-0594 passes at a count of 12 in the affirmative, 2 absent, and 1 in the nay. So that bill passes. Will be on second reader at tonight's council meeting. We will, obviously, this is the last council meeting, so we will be double reading all bills on second reader tonight, including this one. And last and certainly not least, we're on bill number 24-0595. We do have one amendment from the Department of Housing. Is there a motion to approve that amendment? It's been moved and probably second. All in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. Please note that Chairman Costello is a nay for this amendment. That is the only amendment for this bill, so that amendment passes. And at this time, I'll take a motion to vote out this bill as amended. It's been moved and properly seconded. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
President Mosby.
Aye.
Vice President Middleton. Yes. Cohen.
Yes.
McCray is absent. Dorsey. Conway.
Aye.
Schleifer. Torrance is absent. Burnett. Bullock. Porter. Costello. Stokes. Glover.
Yes.
And Ramos.
Thank you all. This motion carries and a vote of 12 in the affirmative, 2 absent, and 1 nay. That means this bill is voted out as amended and will be placed on second reader tonight. Again, all bills on second reader tonight will be given the opportunity to be double read, including this one and the previous one. Thank you so much for joining the committee as a whole. This concludes this special meeting, and we'll see everybody shortly at 4:55 for tonight's council meeting. Thank you.